Shabbat Shalom to the Betham family and community. This will be a Shabbat video, which will kind of serve as my Shabbat sermon this week. I will not be speaking from the Bima tomorrow. Rabbi Chorny will be giving a drash. I'm looking forward to hearing that and to your hearing that. So this is my opportunity to address the congregation this week. And after my Devar Torah, if you would like to stay for a short meditation, that would be wonderful. I will be offering one. I recently had the opportunity to befriend a former neo-Nazi. Let me explain. Some of the strange and wonderful parts of this COVID Zoom world are the side gigs that people have developed, swooping into situations and, for me, teaching opportunities that never would have materialized beforehand. Recently, I was connected with Craig Dershowitz, the heavily tattooed CEO of Artists for Israel. It's a nonprofit focused on burnishing Israel's image within the world of the arts using the arts. And one of his projects is something called Healing Inc. It's a program that tattoos over the scars of wounded Israeli soldiers and victims of terror attacks. And I was brought on as rabbinic counsel on one of his Zoom programs, sharing my sense of what traditional and also evolving rabbinic and halachic culture would say about such a project of tattooing. And since then, I've been invited to other Zoom conversations that Craig led. The last one focusing on whether Jewish artists should proactively help former neo-Nazis who want to cover up their Nazi body tattoos. As a result of that conversation, I'm now in touch with a man named T.M. Garrett, a German-born, now American, former neo-Nazi white supremacist, whose body was once full of Nazi imagery, and who is now fully repentant and is a respected activist on issues of racial justice in our country. He has thoroughly repudiated his past identity and followed that up with laudable action. Reflecting on that transformation, he wrote something interesting on Facebook. They didn't punch the Nazi out of me. They loved the Nazi out of me. He was addressing his words to those who stubbornly hold on to hate, even for those, yes, whom it might be easy to hate. He was speaking as a former hater whose life and ideology was driven by hatred, refusing to replace his former hatred and rejection with a more enlightened one, somehow sanitized because it came from the other side. His rebirth, his renewal, was a response not to being bludgeoned, but to being loved. Garrett's insights helped me process the American week through which we have just lived, and highlighted the parts of Wednesday's inauguration that I found most personally inspiring. President Biden spoke to a moment and a population riddled with rancor and division. He could have crowed. He could have preened. He could have tried to stand out with bombast and judgment and self-righteousness and scorn. He would have scored some points with parts of his fatigued and angry base had he done so. But rather he called for mutual understanding and accord, and seeing not only in ourselves but in the other a deep humanity. He said, quote, "Speaking of unity can sound to some like a foolish fantasy these days, but without unity there's no peace, only bitterness and fury. No progress, only exhausting outrage. No nation, only a state of chaos." I was moved even more when he encouraged us to love and make space for and see the dignity of those with whom we most vehemently disagree. In his words, the answer is not to turn inward, to retreat into competing factions, distrusting those who don't look like you do, or worship the way you do, or don't get their news from the same sources you do, We must end this uncivil war. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility. I was discussing his speech and these words with a dear friend this week, and I was fascinated to learn from him that he thought President Biden was, with those words, mostly addressing his political adversaries. And he was equally fascinated to learn from me that I was certain he was addressing his own team, as it were. I say to myself, and I say to you, if you are certain that he was speaking to them, you are missing the point. Hear his words as if he is directing them at you personally. We do not defeat triumphalism with triumphalism. The president was inviting, maybe even demanding, that we find a way to discuss the politics of our nation without destroying one another and our nation over it. To engage not only in order to win, but to learn. His call to unity was also a reference to the pernicious contagion of disunity and discord. And though he referenced a hardened heart, he likely has no sense of how close one of his sentences came to evoking a famous midrash on this week's Parsha, Parshat Bo. He said that it is not just the case that politics can or must be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Immediately my mind went to one of the midrash's most poignant resolutions of a classic theological conundrum related to the night of Exodus. Now, we've known the story since we were kids, and many of us cannot imagine it without the overlay of Cecil B. DeMille's foggy green angel of death visiting the homes of the Egyptians. What's the question? Why was the blood on the doorposts needed? If you think about it, wouldn't an angel, a force dispatched by the omniscient God, know which homes to strike and which not to, without the bloody lintels as a GPS? One midrash says this: once a destroyer, a mashchit, is let loose, it destroys indiscriminately, even if let loose by the good guys, even by God. Without something to constrain and direct that destructive force, it would have destroyed everything in its path. So too with hate and judgment and the very destructive power of disunity. The very shackling disunity that President Biden exhorted us to throw off this weary nation. With truth, yes. With facts, yes. But not with hammers. With hugs. Not with hate, but with love. I love our country, and I rue what it has become in many ways. Its robust multiculturalism devolving into just a multitude of warring mini nations and cultures. I love our community, our Temple Beth Am family. I love that we are vigorous and varied. I love that we have principles and that we also have patience when exposed to others and their competing principles. I love that within our building, actual or digital, American Jews who would be on opposite sides of the protest out there are sitting next to one another in here, reciting the same liturgy, eating the same cholent, processing the Jewish experience in the same mode, even while deriving different and competing values and lessons from our vaunted tradition. I won't give up on the reunification of our country, and I will not surrender the wholeness of the Beth Am family. And I believe both are achieved with more acceptance than accusation. less ferocity thrown, and more favor extended. Fewer punches, more embraces. Shabbat Shalom. And if that's enough for you, then surely Shabbat Shalom. And if you'd like to extend for a few minutes with a very short meditation, because I know that the video message was long, I encourage you to do so. I ask you to close your eyes. Start breathing into this moment, feeling the rise and fall of your chest as a luxurious, almost decadent act. Placing your feet flat on the floor in front of you, and your hands on your legs. With your dignified spine holding everything in place and allowing nearly every other muscle and fiber to relax and go slack and droop like a weeping willow. I want you to allow your mind's eye to conjure an image of two Hebrew words, Leil Shimurim. If you can spell that out quickly in your brain in Hebrew, the image can be Hebrew letters, or they can be English letters. Leil from night, Shimurim, which can mean to protect, to guard, a vigil. It's how the Torah describes what Exodus night was to God, a Leil Shimurim. According to one medieval commentator from Spain, the Ibn Ezra, Leil Shimurim is the night that God shomered, guarded us, protected us, make sure we got out okay. According to a medieval French commentator, the Bechor Shor, Leil Shimurim is the night that God was waiting for, anticipating. The root shamar can mean to wait for and anticipate. Two powerful images of our relationship with the divine. A presence that protects, keeps us safe. And a presence that is waiting for us to be something, to do something. So you can let your mind wander in this micro moment of tranquility and serenity to either or both of those images. The divine Holy One who holds you, gives you strength, uplifts you, is in between you and travail. Who creates a cocoon within which you can thrive. Whatever images jump to mind when you think of that are natural. Whatever is in your mind is what is in your mind. No need to question it, just see it. Feel that version of Leil Shimurim. Or divine Holy One, whose stance vis-a-vis you is to wait expectantly to see what will be next. Your relationship with God defined by your next move, your next word, your next commitment, your next mitzvah. And just watch your mind literally as images swirl through in response to that notion of divine shimurim. And perhaps let both of them come together as we enjoy these last few moments heading into a Shabbat where we hopefully will feel God's presence and be motivated towards our next divinely inspired act. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And I say Shabbat Shalom and Namaste, and I miss you, and I love you.